We've come now to Movie Spotlight, our weekly feature looking at the latest releases at the Korean box office and beyond. And joining me this week to cast their critical eye of the films is first Jason Bechervaise, who's with me in the studio. Hello, Jason.
Hello, Jeonju.
And we also have film scholar Marc Raymond from Kwangwon University, who is joining us via video today. Hello to you too, Marc, wherever you are.
Hello, guys. How are you guys doing?
Yes, well, it's good to have you on the show, even if it's via video. Now, today we're going to be reviewing one film, and then we're going to do a quick recap of the Jeonju International Film Festival, which kicked off last week and officially ends tomorrow. But first, we are reviewing this week another addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe blockbuster conveyor belt. This time it is Doctor Strange, the sequel to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, or in Korean, Doctor Strange Daeondon의 Multiverse. Now, what's interesting about this film is that it was directed by the genre filmmaker Sam Raimi, who, of course, also directed the original Spider-Man trilogy starring Tobey Maguire. So, Jason, start us off. What can you tell us without giving too much away?
Okay, so this is the 28th film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, otherwise known as MCU. Hard to keep up, right? I'm not going to spend too long summarizing where we are to narratively, as this universe has kind of spread into multi-dimensions, as the title suggests. Still, I would say this is a sequel to the first film, Doctor Strange, obviously, released in 2016, and also follows on from the recent Spider-Man film, No Way Home, in which Strange makes an appearance, of course, causing problems. And so in this latest film, Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, as many of our listeners will know, he again casts a spell. Now, this time it's a forbidden one that opens, guess what, a portal to a multiverse. And so, yeah, we've got Spider-Man vibes here as his team. Wong, played by Benedict Wong. We've also got American Chavez, and they try to stop Scarlet Witch, played by Elizabeth Olsen, from controlling the multiverse so she can, well, she thinks, be reunited with her two children. It's directed by Sam Raimi, like you said, the man behind the original kind of Spider-Man trilogy. That's accredited as redefining the modern superhero genre. He has a strong affiliation with genre cinema, the Evil Dead films in the 1980s, and that's certainly evident in this new film.
Right, so Marc, Jason has already said that Sam Raimi's strong affiliation to genre cinema is evident in this new installment. Would you agree with that? What does Sam Raimi add here to the ever-expanding MCU?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know Sam Raimi directed this film going in, and there is no opening credit, director credit. So I didn't find out till the movie ended, and I was like, "Oh, Sam Raimi directed this," because I do know Sam Raimi's work and I like his films. And I would say kind of yes or no. Like, I don't think when I watched the movie, I didn't go, "Oh, that's definitely a Sam Raimi movie. His fingerprints are all over it." It's still mostly an MCU movie. But it is a good one, I think. And I think it's the quality of the movie, what's there, is attributable to Raimi. I think it's a well-directed film. There's especially a few sequences, and some of the editing really shows Raimi's kind of skill as a kind of craftsman. And I like that aspect of the movie. And he's also quite good with again, with this experience in genre, with the kind of interplay and the relationship between the lead character, Doctor Strange, and the Scarlet Witch. I thought that character was a very good villain, and there was a good kind of relationship between them. Again, I'm not a big MCU person. I've only probably seen about half a dozen of the films of the 20 something that have been made, mostly because I guest on your show and you asked me to see them. For the most part, that's my experience with the universe. But this was one of the ones I liked the most, actually, of the, and that might be attributable to, I haven't seen a lot of them, but I thought this entry was pretty solid, and I think Raimi deserves a fair bit of credit for what's good about the movie, even though at the same time, I would have liked to seen a Sam Raimi MCU movie where he had a bit more of his personality could get into the movie. The movie still has a
Sure.
lot of the generic elements, and it's not as, I don't think it's as good as, for example, his Spider-Man 2, which is a much, I think, better comic book kind of movie. But this one is, I thought it was a pretty good piece of entertainment overall.
Well, Mark, first, thank you for bearing those films for us. Jason, I know you've seen more of these MCU films.
Yes.
Would you agree with Mark that this is one of the better ones? Does it overcome some of this MCU fatigue that people might be feeling?
Well, I mean, this is what Marvel are doing now. They're kind of hiring these, revered filmmakers. You've got Chloe Zhao with the Eternals, and trying to do something new within this universe. Does it work? Yes and no. I mean, in a sense, this film is much of it's what we've seen before. This whole idea of kind of having these universes collide, and it's very, very clever. I think it's kind of reinventing the blockbuster kind of template as we know it. Compared to films like the Star Wars films that came out of the 1970s and 80s and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Tonally, it's a little bit. It's not quite as lively as maybe some of the other films, particularly the Spider-Man films. I'm very curious to see how Korean audiences react to this film. I think it's been somewhat divisive, but certainly Sam Raimi does leave his own mark. There's kind of these horror elements in the film which are quite fun. It's more gory, dare I say, actually, compared to many of the other films. Because I was actually debating whether to take my son to see this film. He's 8 years old. I'm actually glad I didn't.
Wow, okay.
I wouldn't, it's not grotesque or anything, but certainly Sam Raimi does challenge some of the kind of conventions that
Something to consider for parents.
Yeah.
You mentioned you'd be interested to find out what Korean audience think about it. It's done extremely well so far. It opened on Wednesday in South Korea with over 700,000 viewers, and yesterday on Children's Day, it sold over 1 million tickets, and it's the first time in over 2 years that cinemas have seen 1 million moviegoers in a single day. So that's an encouraging sign for the movie industry, right?
It is. I mean, the caveat here, of course, is that it's Marvel films, that are consistently attracting the big numbers. We're seeing that with this particular film, over 1 million admissions yesterday. Of course, it was Children's Day, so it's a good excuse, I think, for parents to take the kids out, assuming they're not too young. And public holidays generally see, higher box office tallies. But it does suggest when the right film comes along, that people will come out and see it. And the test will be this summer, where we've got 2 tentpoles at least. We've got Choi Dong-hoon's Alien coming out. This is a film that's 2 parts, like the Along with the Gods films, a big gamble for CJ. And we've also got Kim Han-min's Han-san, which is part of this Yi Sun-shin kind of trilogy. So we'll have to wait and see whether we see these numbers replicated when it comes to Korean films.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on now and turn to, as we promised, the 23rd Jeonju International Film Festival. Both our critics attended it this past weekend. It is a festival that isn't perhaps quite as high profile as the Busan International Film Festival, but what it lacks in glitz and glamour, it makes up for in charm and adventurousness. Now, before we discuss a couple of your favorite selections, Mark, can you give us an overview of what it was like at Jeonju this year? Because it's had a tough couple of years because of the pandemic as well, right?
Yeah, there were the 2020 version was basically canceled completely, even though there were still selections that year, but there wasn't actually a festival on site. And I attended last year in 2021, but it was very reduced capacity, I think about 30% in theaters. And it didn't really feel like a festival in the same way. There was a little bit of, injection of that spirit, but not very much. This year felt pretty much back to normal, actually. There was full capacity. It did feel like a festival. Of course, there was still, masks and certain social distancing things, but for the most part, um, it did feel very similar to the festival that existed previously. And it was a good selection of films this year, too, which we'll sort of talk about. There was, for example, a retrospective on Lee Chang-dong, the great Korean director, which also included like a documentary about his career. And also, it premiered a short film he did, a 25-minute short film called Heartbeat, which was one of the better films of the festival. Probably not surprising, this kind of single take 25-minute film of this young boy traveling from his classroom to his home, because he's worried about his mother, who is suffering from depression, and if she has possibly committed suicide. The project's actually part of a WHO omnibus film that's going to be released later, but because Lee Jae-myung finished his film first, he decided to premiere it at the festival. So yeah, the festival I thought was, I attended for, I was there for about 4 to 5 days, and saw a good selection of films. And I think also the Korean competition this year was also quite strong as well. So it was nice to be back to like a full kind of festival after the last couple of years of it being either canceled completely or in a very reduced form. Yeah.
Right, it sounds like all good news, really. Jason, what were your impressions? And do you agree with Mark that this was a strong year?
Oh, absolutely. I had a really good time down in Jeonju. I watched a lot of films, over a dozen in total, if I factor in the films I watched beforehand. And yeah, it was a strong year for Korean cinema. I watched films mainly in competition. Mark mentioned the Heartbeat, the short by Lee Chang-dong, which was absolutely fantastic. There's also Archaeology of Love, directed by Lee Won-min. This was in competition. That was probably my favorite film. But there is a whole number of films. There's Kim Jin-hwa's Missing Yoon, which I quite like. Yeah, there's a really interesting documentary directed by Hongdae called Saving a Dragonfly, that was about the kind of the Suneung exam, and the competition winner, Jung Jie's Jongsun. That was a really interesting film too. So plenty there. And in terms of the number of female directors in competition, there were 7 out of 9. So that's a really encouraging sign. And yes, good films, and I had a good time.
Mark, any other films we haven't mentioned before we go?
Yeah, I'd point out the movie The Hill of Secrets, which I think was the best film I saw while I was there, directed by Lee Ji-yoon. And this was kind of an unusual one in that most of the Korean competition films debut at Jeonju, and this one actually debuted in Berlin earlier in the year. And so it was able to get into that festival. And it's a very good film, reminiscent of a lot of these indie dramas that focus on young girls. And it has a clear autobiographical kind of element to it. So reminiscent of things like The World of Us and House of Hummingbird and Moving On, a lot of these acclaimed indies of the last few years. And I suspect it'll probably get a theatrical release eventually, and I think we'll find kind of an audience within that kind of smaller kind of niche market, because it is very good lead performance by the young actress. And yeah, Lee Ji-yoon is definitely a director to watch out for. And also I'd echo Jason's praise for some of the other films he mentioned, like Jung Soon, also a very good film. And yeah, it's great to see that there are so many films by these younger female directors getting their chance at their first film as well.
Well, I'm sure we'll get more comprehensive reviews of some of those films in the near future when they see theatrical releases. But for now, we'll leave it there for this week's Movie Spotlight. Mark, Jason, thank you both for your reviews, and we'll see you again next time.
Take care.
Thank you.